the kid wore it in the Terminator movie. We printed that shirt for him to wear in that movie, and that shirt went quadruple platinum. Everybody had to have one.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to This Is How It Starts. My name is Amy Stevland, and thanks once again for taking the time to hit play. Now, before we get into this episode, I'd like to ask you to take a moment to think about your favorite concert t-shirt. Does the memory take you back to a time when you attended an amazing show from your favorite artist, maybe with your best pals? Do you remember how you were able to telegraph your taste in music and find connection with someone across the room who might enjoy the same kind of music you do? I mean, when you put it like that, it feels like more than just a piece of fabric, right? Now, personally, I would be a whole adult before I would be able to attend my first concert and buy my own concert shirt. But teenage me would actually spend hours in the family basement painting my own shirts with puffy paint from the fabric store bought with the small reward earned from a good report card. Little did I know that years later I would be managing the design and creation of the concert merchandise for some of the world's biggest musical artists alongside my guests today. So maybe while you listen, dig out that old favorite shirt and give it a good hug. Here's my conversation with San Francisco artist and rock and roll screen printing legend, Frank Vacanti. Well, we have Frank Vacanti on the program. Welcome, Frank. It's been a very long time since we've seen each other and worked together, so I'm super excited to have you on the program. Before we dig into the conversation, I want to share a little bit about you so that people know a little bit just about your history. We're going to talk more about it, but just to kind of give people the highlights. So from the late 70s through the early 90s, you had served as the production manager for Wonderland Productions. Based in San Francisco, it was the industry leader in music merchandise design and production, serving mega artists like Madonna, Sting, George Michael, New Kids on the Block, my favorite, Janet Jackson, and more.
Yeah.
Frank was really instrumental in building the production facility. At one point, it's reported printing on 16 automated presses with a capacity for 3 million units per month. That's an insane amount of product. From then, Frank continued to work from the 90s through the 2000s through various incarnations of the company. And Frank is a screen printer and a graphic artist in his own right at Frankie V Studios. A couple of fun facts, and Frank, you can tell me if these are still accurate, but I know you have one of the largest Elvis memorabilia collections in the United States, maybe the world, I don't know, maybe. And one of my other favorite stories was about your upside down record player in one of your classic cars.
Yes. Yes.
Still have that, baby? Oh man.
No, actually, my music collection just in general is very huge. But
Yeah.
yes, I do. I actually have the first rock and roll T-shirt ever printed, which is a 1956 Elvis Presley T-shirt that was available in retail stores. They weren't selling them at concerts in the 50s, and it is considered the first music merchandise piece ever created. And so that's cool. And the upside down record player, that car had to go as well. But I've got another classic. And now I have a portable 8-track player. It's my 72 Chevelle, and her name is Snowflake. And I have my 8-track player, my 8-track collection, which is another whole story in and to itself.
Oh, that's great. That's great. It's funny that you mentioned that Elvis Presley T-shirt, because one of the things I was going to say was, just the plain cotton T-shirt was still considered underwear until like the 50s. And then it was like, until like Marlon Brando and James Dean started wearing them in the movies and they became really cool. And then, yeah, I think the first one was that Elvis one. So what was your sort of first introduction to the promo T-shirt, and then how did you get started creating them?
Well, when I was in high school, I had really great high school art teachers and craft teachers, and we had a semester where we were doing screen printing, and I did a screen print of all things, Herbert Lom as the Phantom of the Opera with a big screamy face. And I printed it on paper, and I happened to be wearing a white T-shirt. So I took my shirt off and printed it on the shirt and wore it around school thinking I was pretty cool. And all my friends wanted one. And I went, that's interesting. The people want to pay me for one of my T-shirts. And so I printed up a couple for my friends. And then the next couple shirts I did, I actually still have a few of those. I did a Jimi Hendrix, of course, and a Janis Joplin. This was the late 60s. This would have been about 68, 69, 70. And so it kind of took off from there. And then
Well, it's interesting that screen printing was being taught in schools at the time. So, but screen printing was being taught because that was the printing method for posters at the time, or why were they teaching screen printing at that time?
it was for paper. It was definitely for
Yeah,
posters.
paper.
It's
Okay.
screen printing in the 60s. I mean, geez, you had Andy Warhol, just in art galleries with his screen prints. And my beautiful, beautiful art teachers, Mrs. Spear and Mrs. Kramer, were very hip and very up on what was going on in the whole art world with all the big graphics and the Lichtensteins and everything. And they would take us to the galleries and they decided to show us how to screen print. And so we all made our little screen prints on paper. It was just I happened to be wearing a white t-shirt that day and I took it off and printed it just because I went, hey, I think this could work. And it did, and it's not like I invented t-shirt printing, but it gave me the idea. And from that idea, I did a couple more. And then as I got further in high school, I got together with a friend of mine and we tried to start our own business. And what did I know about rights or anything? And, I thought, hey, if all my friends like them, the whole world's going to love them. And it went absolutely nowhere. But I came up with some kind of fun designs. It was fun. But then, really, what happened next is I went to work for my father. Uh, we were a big family, big Italian Catholic family, 6 kids. And my older brother and sister had already gone to college and dropped out and used up all my dad's money. And my dad decided instead of sending me to college, he was going to bring me into his studio. And he had a little studio called Vision and Design where they did everything from sculpture to painting to rendering to advertising for Dunlop tires. I still have a can I made of Dunlop tennis balls and I put the logos on the can, stuff like that. It's just industrial art. And with that experience, my dad would take me to places and watch things get made. And I got to meet all these printers and all these craftsmen. This is back when people were still setting type. And I got to meet typesetters and screen printers that would print like point of purchase displays for stores, and the screens would be like 30 feet long in these big huge machines, and watching these people just looking at their color keys and watching and getting their color balances right, and the energy and work and the craftsmanship that went into this, and it was stunning, and it was just wonderful, wonderful work. And that gave me the background that ultimately led me to a couple steps towards San Francisco. I started studying airbrushing and I did some airbrush paintings, went to New York City at some comic conventions like we all did. Everybody, all the artists I work at Winterland were frustrated comic artists who were trying to break into the comic industry that was near impossible. And we all ended up at Winterland. And so I was doing the comic conventions and doing my little airbrushes of King Kong and all the sci-fi stuff. Got to Atlanta, and that's where I started. I walked into a t-shirt store that wanted an airbrush artist to airbrush on t-shirts. I said, well, I've airbrushed on paper. I'm sure I can figure this out. And I think the whole process was just always being open to that next step. So I started airbrushing on t-shirts. And what helped me was when I started airbrushing, I knew about CMYK printing because screen printing, newsprint, comic books, read comic books, look at them in a loop, and you see how colors built in the process colors. So the big innovation I brought to my airbrushing was I started painting in yellow, magenta, cyan, and black. And that just cut my time right down. I had a couple other primaries. You could throw a green in there or some fluorescent colors or whatever you wanted for highlights, but you could always do your basic painting in CMYK. So I really started honing my skills and understanding CMYK printing through.
Because those inks were transparent, right?
Yes.
They weren't opaque. So yeah,
Yes.
wow.
It was all building with transparency, and
Yeah.
and so that's why when I finally got the call, I was sitting there airbrushing and I got a phone call that Winterland is going to open a print shop in San Francisco. I was working for a company in Atlanta. It was a company store where I airbrushed, and it was called T-Shirtery. And they were doing the East Coast printing for Del Ferrano and Winterland Productions and Bill Graham. And so Bill Graham decided that we don't want to deal with all these other printers we can't trust. We got to build our own shop. And I got called out just to be an artist because I could airbrush. And when I got there, there was no art department. There was a very small production department. One machine, 5 color, one 4 color hand press, and nobody could keep a register. Nobody could set them up. Nobody could figure it out. And that's where everything clicked for me. The possibilities were just mind blowing. It was just staggering. So I ended up, after being there for about 6 months, I worked up my nerve and went up and had a meeting with, at the time, the big three: Del Ferrano, Rick Fish, and Don Hunt. So I walked up and I just looked at him and I said, "You guys, I know what you need. I know what this has to be. This is just, we got to do this, this, this." And I had laid it all out. And I said, "If we do this, we will succeed." And I guess the big thing that put it over was, I said, "You don't even have to give me any money. Just let me do it. I know I can do it. I know I can do this. I know when I do this, you're going to be extremely happy." And they just looked at me like I was crazy and said, "Go ahead." And the next week I had more money on my check. I started at $3.10 an hour, minimum wage at that time. And we went on to build the juggernaut known as Winterland. And all I did was apply all the industry and all the information I got from my dad and vision and design in Buffalo, New York, Western New York. I brought with it what I like to call East Coast industrial. There's just a mindset of people in the Northeast at that time in the late 60s, especially craftsmen. And you just brought an industrial sense to everything and you made it work like a machine. You got to do the work. And that's what I tell everybody to this day. Andy Warhol did the work. Okay. Everybody did the work. You have to be able to do the work. And it doesn't happen like magic. You have to put in your time and study and understand. And so I got to Winterland and we had, like I said, a 5 color press. Now you have 15 color presses, you got digital presses, you got all this. We were stuck with 5 colors and very crude and basic industry. I mean, they hadn't even really come up with the fancier mesh counts and the tighter screens and the flash curing and the in-betweens and all this other stuff. It was just ink on a shirt, which I think it kind of shows you, if you look back at that stuff at that time, there's a kind of an innocent joy to it. It's, how do I get this picture on this shirt? It's not about matching perfectly. It's not about, PMS colors just perfect. It's about, how do I make this look cool on a shirt so a kid's going to want to put it on and walk down the street and wear it. And so we started developing what I like to call the t-shirt art. T-shirt art is just totally unique upon itself.
Yeah. A whole other type of canvas. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's understanding your substrate, understand, very good point. It's understanding your canvas and how do you apply this. At the time we were using water-based inks and nasty chemicals. And I'll never forget the day the first guy walked in. Yeah. With the first can of plastisol I ever saw, it said, "Try this." Hey, it didn't try in the screen. It was like plastisol was the same thing they used to paint the stripes and roads. Okay, so everything was just new. And so we started working with this plastisol. And of course it was full of lead, so it was very opaque. So you didn't need any underbasing or anything, but what do we know? It was like, this stuff works, this is great. And then things started getting very interesting, because as we started getting bigger, we started hiring more artists. And I think what really made us unique was the gene pool that we dipped into, were all these fellow people that worked in comics. We had this graphic artist, Colin Birdseye. He came from England, and he was doing coloring in Marvel Comics for Marvel UK. This was his background, and he came here to make T-shirts. Raymond Lorette, a very successful cartoonist in his own right, had a strip in the East Bay Express forever. Just had this cartooning and this everybody had that same thing. We all read comic books. We all knew what this was, and we started applying it to to what we were doing. And it was all done by hand. There was no computers. I don't know if you can remember this far back, but everything was letretone. You would buy this halftone on clear sheets that had gum on one side, and you would layer it down on film and then shoot your screen through it. It was really like hands-on rapidographs. You had your rapidograph pens, and everything took a while. I mean, we had a young artist in Sarah Nirvana was her name, and she was just with her rapidograph. It would take her 2 weeks, but she would do these stipple, and you had to think in you had to see in black and white and think in color. And she would put together these designs that were just stunning, and you couldn't do it any other way at that time. And this stuff was just mind blowing. And by the time we hit the industry and the industry started seeing what we were doing, it was just, it blew everything right out of the water, because now you're starting to get art from people like Kelly and Mouse and Journey album covers that are very colorful, and the Grateful Dead, and all their imagery. And we take this stuff. Another great artist there was Roger Jackson. He was just a master at comic blending, and he could just blend that letretone like no tomorrow. And he would be putting together this stuff, and it was like nothing you had ever seen before on a t-shirt. And that's what really brought us our claim to fame. It was all done on a 5-color machine. And then we bought another 5-color machine. Then we got our 6-color machine. Wow. The world opened up for us,
There's an old promo video from Wonderland I think it's on YouTube. Based on the music they're playing in the background, is probably from like the late 80s. And you can see it. You guys are like right in the transition of, moving from the paste ups on the light box.
Yes.
To early, the early computers. And so you were talking about like the Journey, stuff. So did you guys have to like take album covers and like recreate them?
Yes. A good example was the Rolling Stones Tattoo You, with Mick with his tattoos on his face on the front. I'm sure people are pretty familiar with this. And Keith on the back. And that was our shirt, Mick on the front, Keith on the back, with our own special type that had full color tattoos inside the type. And it was all done with a rapidograph. And they would send us the album slicks, and we would just put the slick down, put the clear over it, and start drawing. And just you would trace it off, and then start stippling and putting in your different colors and your depth, and put it all together. And it was just so basic but cool, because it always worked. You knew it was going to work. You could put it up on the press, and you knew within a color change you were there. And then actually we got a little more sophisticated than that. As I said earlier, my friend Colin Birdseye he was an airbrush guy, and like I was, but he could take the film and airbrush on it in layers, black ink, so you have to see it all in black in color. And then he would take it into the darkroom, shoot it through a halftone screen, give it to me. I'd set it up on the machine. Bruce Springsteen, Pink Cadillac. That thing is still in print today. That thing was done on a 6-color press with hand airbrush separations. And if you look close at it, it's just, and he did it in a night. He was amazingly fast with that thing. I remember we went out, took a picture of a Cadillac. I knew where the car was. He came back, did the art. I came in the next morning. He was asleep in the darkroom. I got the film, put it on a screen, and we were running it the next afternoon.
You guys were the photographers, the artists, the illustrators, the typesetters, the darkroom operators. You guys were everything all in one.
We were the creators. And you see, the big difference between then and now is there was no internet. There was no photo approval. The approval was done when I was happy. I would show it to Del Ferrano in the window right above machine number 3. I would hold it up. And if he gave me a thumbs up, it was time to print. If he gave me a thumbs down, I'd change it some more until he was happy, usually within 30 minutes. He didn't like to waste time or money. And we would just get it done. And the bands came to us for that. They had no idea. They weren't thinking about t-shirts. They were thinking about their albums. They were thinking about the concerts. They were leaving it up to us. And not everybody, but pretty much the majority of everybody we work with came to us because of our reputation and because of what we did.
Yeah, that's amazing that the artists were coming to you guys. They saw you as the experts and left that to
Yes,
you, because I think as probably time moved on, it became less, it was kind of like uncool to have merchandise, because then there's this whole notion of selling out. And was there any of that as things
yes.
got started, or were people were pretty open once they figured out like, hey, this looks cool, let's do it? Like what was kind of like the temperature with the bands?
It's interesting because a lot of bands were a little bit like, oh man, we're not going to sell out. You know, this our fans aren't going to like
Ah,
this. But then you got people like the Rolling Stones coming in going, hell, we can make some money on this, you know? So there was a little bit of both. You know, the Stones have always been unabashedly, they're in it for, just the what they generate. And God bless them. They're still out there doing it. So it was really left up to us. The band didn't want to get involved because of the idea that they might be selling out. But then that changed soon enough. We working with the Grateful Dead was just the best. They were just so cool. They had their office right here in San Rafael, and they attracted the biggest artists. And one of my best memories was they were doing the Dylan Dead tour, and Rick Griffin had done the artwork for the album cover and the artwork for the tour. And so Rick came into Winterland with all his big drawings and everything, put him in the art department. We shot all the film. We set it up. He was on the machine with me mixing ink. You know, we weren't going with PMS Red 200. It was all by eye, and he goes, yeah, that's it. Okay, go with this. Putting it all together. And then I got in my car and drove up to San Rafael, knocked on the door at their little office space down here on Lincoln Avenue, and they were always really great, happy to see me. Oh boy, Frankie's here with the T-shirts, and they'd be having a band meeting, and I'd bring it in and show it to them. And their one comment was, "Did Rick see it? I just left him on the floor. He wouldn't let me leave if he didn't like it." And then the next comment was always Mickey Hart going, I always remembered to print his size. Can I wear that? And I would always give him the sample, and he would wear it that night at the show. And it was just this little dance we would do. But again, it was the collaboration. It was the fact that we liked working with one another, we trusted each other, and we could get things done. And that was just the beauty of the early years of the
yeah,
industry. It was
you
just
can't ask for
awesome.
better advertising than the band member wearing the shirt up on stage.
Yeah, exactly. And
Incredible.
and of course, but back then with the Grateful Dead, it was always the same audience every night. So they would have great sales the first night, and everybody'd see them wearing it, and they buy it. But then it's all the same
Uh,
people, and they've already bought it. So it was a lot different back
yeah,
then. It was very.
that's a whole other challenge I remember you and I had to tackle. So yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, indeed. But it was such a great place to work, and we got to work with such great people, and it really extended to a lot. I have to hand it to uh, Bill Graham and especially Del Ferrano. And I'm going to say this
Sure.
because the guy was so smart. When rap music started coming out, everybody was just running away from it. And Del Ferrano got on the phone and he got in touch with Richard Simmons and he got in touch with all these people and said, what's going on here? And sure enough, by mid to late 80s, we were the number one place for rap acts to get their shirts done because we were rap friendly. We loved those guys. We did the rap trading cards. We did this, we did that. We're doing Houdini. It all kind of started with the New Edition. And when we got in with Maurice Starr and the New Edition, who also, started working towards the New
Yeah, I
Kids
want to
on the
get
Block.
there. Yep.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but in the very early days, it was just amazing because all these artists were coming in and we're doing Run DMC and we're doing all this and nobody was understanding it. And that's where I really handed to them because I understood it early. This was something that was important. This is something that was new. It's like when we signed Madonna and did her first tour, the Virgin tour in 85, the Beastie Boys opened. They didn't have a deal. We gave them a deal. I won't tell you what it said on the shirt. It's not family friendly, but it was the Beastie Boys, okay? But it was like, and I remember going to that show at the Civic Center in San Francisco, and the Beastie Boys they were amazing. But so many of our contemporaries that were my age were just really violently against it. I mean, there was people that really just hated it, and we were there. We were there, and it gave them a friendly place to come, and we were signing these guys left and right, LL Cool J and all these guys, and they were just very, again, easy to work with, good collaborators. They were just happy that if you made them look good and you made them some money, and that was our job, and that's what we did, and it was just another great movement that we got to catch the wave on well before
That's
anybody
great.
else. We
Yeah.
were right
I'm
there.
actually glad to hear that, Frank, because there was a time where the company actually moved away from that. But I'm really glad to hear that during those early days, that was, that was important. So yeah, that's cool.
When the kid wore it in the Terminator movie,
Mhm.
we printed that shirt for
Yeah.
him to wear in that movie, and that shirt went
I
quadruple platinum.
bet.
Everybody had to have one, so it was so nice because we were already involved with Public Enemy.
Yeah.
They were one of our signed artists.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
it was just it was an exciting time. The 80s were great. They were just exciting. There was a lot of stuff going on, and things were happening very fast, and it was a good time. It was really a
Yeah.
good time.
Which is a great kind of segue because I was just about to transition to sort of like, in my mind as, a kid around this time. So, I remember the biggest names in merchandise at that time was Kiss, probably still is to this day. And then the
Yes.
New Kids on the Block explosion. And like I said,
Yes.
like there's this promo video for Winterland just on the cusp of this whole shift in technology. What do you remember about that? Like the explosion of like the New Kids on the Block era. What do you remember about just that particular point in time?
We had been building Winterland slowly and steadily. We started with one 5-color press, got a second 5-color press, then got a 6 and got a second 6, and then we got an 8, and we were slowly building. And by the time we left Tennessee Street and moved to Bryant Street to get more space, we had built ourselves up to a 16 press juggernaut. This is where the numbers were. But when by the time that explosion happened, we were just ready for it. We were in position to be able to take this on. And we had the crew trained. People knew what to do, how to do it. Work ethic. You got to do the work in order to get the great results. And we could do it. And at the same time, we were doing New Kids on the Block. We were doing Garth Brooks. They would come into the shop and look around and see what they were getting involved in, and everybody loved what they saw. The New Kids on the Block came in. I remember Jonathan was just the most gorgeous boy I ever saw in my life. I wanted to just, I just fell in love with him. He had these eyelashes that would just, I mean, I just remember looking at him in real life, and it was like surreal. It would be like looking at Elvis or something. You just can't be this beautiful, son. You just can't. Gorgeous kid. But they would come in, and these people, were in. It was a good place to be. There was energy, there was music, and the machines were making their own kind of music. And at the same time, we were doing Garth Brooks' New Kids on the Block. We were doing Hard Rock Cafe, which would stay on 2 machines 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You just drop a different city in, and that would just go for a year. Just never stop. Just always, you could just keep that corner going. And in the meantime, we're still innovating, and getting into more all over prints, and different things were starting to come up. We did a shirt for Universal Studios that was it was their logo. It was all neon. It's all like different color neons. I don't know if you remember this logo.
Mhm.
And they wanted it to all look like neon tubes, and we couldn't do that many different color puffs. So we came up with this great idea of doing a puff underbase and putting the transparent colors on top
Right.
very lightly,
Yeah.
so that when it puffed like popcorn, the clear ink on top would stretch, and you would get all these little neon effects. We would do this stuff on the run.
Yeah.
It's just like, how can we make this work? You've got like a couple hours to figure it out and then make it work and have a hit record.
Yeah.
It's like, it was the spontaneity. And so we were just rocking on all levels by that point. And the New Kids on the Block was just phenomenal. It was unbelievable how you could just tap into this young teenage girls. That's what it is. And just find this thing. And at their peak, it was just impossible. It was just, they were just so popular. And it just took everything to the next level. So yeah, the New Kids on the Block, I take my hat off to him. To this day, I was still working on them. They wanted us to redo a bunch of the old designs just like
Yeah.
4 or 5 years ago. They're still
Yeah.
out there. They're still
Yeah.
doing it. And again, too, I think that the my favorite bands were always the ones that gave us the most success. And people always thought that was kind of cynical, and that was just because I made money off of it. But it's not really true, because there's another part to this that people, you have to keep in mind. If you're selling to fans, you better understand who your audience is. You have to get in the mind of the fan. You have to understand it. And if you understand the fan, you will succeed in selling them the
Right.
product. People won't go, at least at that time, won't just buy anything. You had to turn that fan on. You had to make that fan excited. And I made it my point to take this music home, listen to it, understand it. I had my little niece was really into New Kids on the Block. I got her tickets for the Oakland show. She still thanks me for that. But I had to get into her head and understand it, and sit there and listen to it with her and understand it, and understand that these are really well-crafted records by very talented young people, and they deserve what they're getting. There's no free ride here. They did the work. They got to where they got to, and we helped support that by doing our work. And that's what made the whole process successful for everybody on every level. It seems like artists, not all artists, but artists today, they want to skip all the, they don't want to play the clubs. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. They want to go on TV and become famous when they're 15. And what they don't realize, New Kids on the Block did a lot of work. They worked really hard to get to where they were. And it wasn't just all going into stadiums right away, and the New Edition, you look at these guys, and then what they turned into with Bobby Brown and Bill Bev DeVoe and all these other, offshoot bands. And these guys they saw the industry and they saw the work and they did it. And that's why they were successful.
And if you wanted their album, you had to leave your house to go get it and purchase it.
Yes. And that's dedication, baby. But yeah, and it's like the fun thing I used to always do. I remember because I had a lot of immigrants and a lot of Vietnamese immigrants were coming in from Vietnam after the Vietnam War, and I hired a bunch of them. But I remember we were doing all this work. And I went up to my boss. I went up to Don Hunt at that point and said, look, I got to take these guys to a show. These guys got to see what they're making this stuff for. And I took them all to see Bruce Springsteen in Oakland. And it was so funny because we went as a group and we spent most of the time standing there by the t-shirt stand, watching fans buy. And I said, this is what it's about. That's one thing in there. But look here, look at the smiles on these faces. Look at this. And I would sit there. That's where I'd spend most of my time at shows.
I remember doing it too.
Just because, what are people buying? What are they reacting to? What are they turning on to? And doing your homework. You get involved in the fandom of it. And that's really what it's all about. And that's what got me into it. It was just, I was in a band when I was in high school, but I realized I'm never going to be in a rock band. I'm not good enough. It's too much work. It's too much on the road. It's a long, lonely life. I think I'd just rather just make some merchandise for these guys. And that's how I got to where I am.
It's funny, you're leading us right down the road. I mean, I'm not even really like, this isn't really scripted, but you led us right to my next thought was, when we were working together, you gifted me, and here I'm going to tilt my screen here so you can see it. You gifted me this beautiful screen print of the Janet Jackson album cover. I think it's like a 14 color print. It's just gorgeous. You would look at it and think it's a photograph. Just what you guys did, on fabric is just incredible. But it takes me back to, I think it was, so this is going to be a totally self-serving question because I'm a big Janet Jackson fan and you know this about me, but I think that's actually when I became aware of like music merchandise. I remember seeing it around school. It was Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation tour. and people had that key
Oh yeah.
earring. Now, some of people made their own, but
Yeah.
Winterland produced a bunch of
Uh,
that stuff, and the T-shirts were gorgeous. Any photo of Janet was just gorgeous. Do you remember anything from the Rhythm Nation project or the Janet project, or you guys even did Velvet Rope?
Yes, I didn't get to meet Janet, and I always wanted to because I always thought that she was the super talented younger sister that
Right.
nobody paid attention to. Okay, I mean I'm fine with Michael and I'm fine with the Jackson Five, but Janet was really something special, and we had signed her early. And the first album that came
Control.
out, uh, Control, yeah, which was it was successful, it was okay, but when Rhythm Nation came out and you first saw that video, it was kind of like seeing it changed. It was like seeing Michael Jackson do the moonwalk. She comes out in that outfit and that whole military thing. And I remember the first, that was, she wanted a leather hat and we made her a leather hat. And I went, that's cool. That's different. She doesn't want a baseball hat. She wants a leather hat that looks just like it goes with the uniform. And there was this whole it was a very unified line and a lot of black and white photography, the album cover and everything. And it was just phenomenal. And I went and saw that show and it was just mind boggling great. It was just great. And Janet was just a real class act. She was just awesome. Yeah, that print that was actually separated by Barbara Beretta.
Barbara Beretta, yes.
Yes, she
Yeah.
was really great, and she was just a real quiet, girl, and she just sit there and work this stuff. And when she did that print, it knocked my eyes out too. By that time, we started moving into more colors because
Right.
you could. So instead of just the graphics, now you're getting photographic. And again, this is pre-digital. It's early digital by this time.
Mhm.
So early that digital just is barely doing anything for you. It's really crude when you're at Photoshop 1, okay?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like it's a
exactly.
totally different animal. But she just nailed that one and I was really so proud of that print. That was kind of the peak that we reached with Janet. But still I'm always partial to that early stuff.
It's funny that you mentioned Barbara because I remember one of the things that really struck me when I came to work with you guys was, in the best possible way, was just how normal you guys are. I
Yes.
think there's
Yes.
this notion,
Yeah.
maybe for me, growing up in the Midwest, and the stereotype about artists was that we were swinging from the rafters, and in order to really have a career in the arts, or in music, you almost had to be like a rock star yourself.
Yep.
Like, you couldn't fit in if you didn't have a green mohawk or something. And I and I just remember, maybe being a little insecure about that when I started my career, that maybe I wasn't cool enough or whatever. And I came to work with you guys, and as I came to understand all the things that you guys worked on, it was so refreshing to me, because I just thought you guys were the coolest. And there was none of that, none of those stereotypes were really present, and that was really refreshing to me.
Barbara was like she's such a sweet and she's like very soft spoken. No, I think we it goes back to what I continually say. It's doing the work. It is a job. And you can be any way you want to be. When Winterland first started, we hired a lot of like-minded hippie concert going kids who all wanted to get into this thing and make some money. And it didn't work out real well because they were in it for wrong reasons. Then we started hiring very interesting people because you're not going to get famous doing this. Well, in a way, it's interesting because in the screen print industry, I got quite a bit of notoriety, which is pretty interesting. It still carries to this day. But to even make the story even more interesting, and I hope I'm not going on a tangent here, thing that happened to our industry is in a movie called Almost Famous. And I don't know if you've
Mhm.
seen that movie.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have.
Mhm.
And in that movie, the band is all sitting backstage and they bring them a box of t-shirts. And the t-shirts look horrible. And and the band is upset. And that set the tone. And every young person that gets in a band remembers that scene in the movie, has no trust in the people that make their merchandise. Maybe they shouldn't, I don't know. But it's like, it's just set the stage up for, I'm not listening to you, you're going to do what I'm telling you because I know more than you. And it just, and it set such a bad
Wow,
precedent
I didn't
and it
know.
really upset me. because this is my industry, this is my life.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Sometimes I get a little upset when I see some of the things that are out there today because I mean, studying under you guys and then, creating those things for a number of years, you just don't ever look at it the same way once you know what goes into it. And, maybe it's not quite this bad, but it's like you almost can't really enjoy it the way you would if you were, if you hadn't worked in it.
There's a lot of innovations. I know some really talented people that are working with these new digital presses, and it's incredible what they're doing. And what makes it really good is because if you want Harry Styles' face reproduced perfectly on a gazillion units for little teenage girls to buy, uh, I don't know if they hang on to them. I guess they would. Maybe I'm just being generation centric here, and I shouldn't be. But it's kind of like it's just everything's so much more disposable now. It used to be you would buy this and hang on to it and wear it
Shirts were
out.
built to
And
last. That ink wasn't going
yes, and
anywhere.
then yeah, and then you save them in your closet, even though they didn't
Right.
fit anymore, because you just like to touch it, to feel and get that energy from it. But in a modern scenery here, the best way to get an approval is just to do it perfectly digitally, get it out as quickly as possible. And there's talent. I'm not saying there's no talent in digital artwork. I'm digital now too. There's a lot of great things about it. It's cleaner. It's better for the environment. There's all kinds. No more darkroom. No more chemicals pouring all that silver right into the bay and everything. Oh, it's better. It is better. But I just think that some of it just doesn't seem to have the soul.
Yeah.
That are you really touching the fan, or are they truly just buying something because they're conditioned to buy something at a
Right.
concert now? And can you really turn them on? Can you really do it?
What I've been noticing lately is just it seems like there's potentially a whole generation of designers who just simply were not taught or know how to design anything other than within a square box on social media. And they don't understand how to design on a canvas that wraps around the body and it's a three-dimensional experience. Like that's what I've been seeing in the space. What's your take on that? What are you seeing?
Well, I think that that's such a great point because computers have made good artists better and poor artists faster.
Right.
And I think what you see here, so there you have people now who don't want to pay designers. They would rather just go to the lowest, just get anything that we can put on a shirt, which is why a lot of bands now are actually hiring their own designers because that a design, the whole idea of Winterland, which was complete under one roof, screen printing, inventory, art, yeah, sales, everything was in one building. As it slowly broke off, now you have people just handling bands in their living room and farming all the work out. Separations. I was running the technical department at Live Nation.
Right.
Screen printers are offering that now because you have buttons to push. You have a computer that can do it for you. Now, I'm not going to say it's worse or better, but you lose that hand touch.
Yeah.
You lose that. It's very. I get very zen about this. You got your mind to your heart to your it's like and in order to make your hand do what it's supposed to do, you have to connect it to your heart first before it goes to your brain. You've got to feel it and you can tell. And that's what I was saying earlier about seeing fans react when you're designing for the fan and you know that this is going to knock them out. And that's what it's all about. It's making that connection. And can you make that connection? It's not about you. You are not the star. He's the star. You're going to make him look better. And because of that, you will succeed.
Yeah, that's what I love so much about what we did is, we were creating connection. Yes, we're creating t-shirts and tchotchkes and whatever else, but what
Yes.
we always, the big picture was we were creating connection between people. Like, I'm wearing this shirt. Oh, you like them too? Like, oh, that's amazing. Yay, we're best friends now. That was always what I loved about, about what we did. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that.
And then, as far as like designers and understanding, the best thing you can do with the best design is something where you're walking down the street and you look at that and go, wow, that's great. And you don't have to say, hey, stop. let me look at this. What's going on here?
Right.
You make that initial impact right away, and immediately, oh, this person's cool. I dig this. Or, oh, this person, I can't go near this person. But it's kind of like you get that communication. And if you do your job right, that communication will happen. And again, to your point too, you're not just, it's not a flat canvas. The Andy Warhol printed on canvas. You're printing on a body, and there's a cross and you have a shape. And if you hit that shape, my whole idea was always to enhance, make somebody look better. You don't put a big circle too low on a design, because a guy with a pot belly, it's going to make his belly look
Right.
bigger, and he's never going to wear it because he's going to look fat. Okay. And with women, it's like if they put it on and tie it up and they look good and they're ready to go off to the mall or something,
Mhm.
they're going to wear it. If the shirt's off center or it's not accenting or doing anything, it goes in the corner and pretty soon it's
Yeah.
wax in a car. So you have to remember what it's all about. And that's where people need to study. And you really need to study people. You need to study the music. You got to study culture. You got to study trends. And you have to understand that you're not just drawing pretty
Right.
pictures. Anybody can do that.
Your mouth to everyone's ears. I love it. Frank, this is why I
Yeah.
enjoyed so much working with you. I learned so much from you. And it was really a highlight of my career to be able to work with you. And I'm so glad we got to catch up and spend this time together. You're a legend. I could just soak it up for days. I love you.
It's my pleasure.
I can't wait.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I love you dearly, and I'm very happy for the opportunity. So thank you.
And there you have the very short version of the very long history of the Modern Music t-shirt from Mr. Frank Vacanti. Frank has some beautiful original artwork available through his White Album project. Now, the website's a little long to spell out here, but if you just search Frank's name along with the White Album project, it should pop right up. If you'd like to learn more about my work, you can also find my website at amybruckner.com. That's AIMEEBRUCKNER.com. I hope you found a new appreciation for that old shirt, and if you're an aspiring designer, I hope you'll take Frank's wisdom and apply it to your own artistic approach. And if you enjoyed that conversation, I hope you'll take a moment to rate, review, share, and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next episode of this limited series. Hope to see you next time on This Is How It Starts with Amy Stevlin.